Horror as a medium has always fascinated me from an early age. I grew up on Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark before graduating onto more age-inappropriate films that would keep me awake for months at a time. Despite these ever-present uncomfortable emotions, I keep going back to the horror genre. Just why? But it hasn't been until recently that I began to think about why horror has always stood as this morbid curiosity. I've spent a lot of my adult life seeking new ways to feel uncomfortable, and I think now I understand why I love it so much. I'm this weird combination of personality types. Like, I'm a thrill seeker that loves the idea of like huge roller coasters and abseiling down cliffs. But I'm also an abject coward with a higher than normal level of anxiety. So I think, what if the line snaps? What if the roller coaster derails? What if the parachute doesn't open? What if the plane just drops out the sky? And horror has always been a way to explore this thrill seeker side of me without having to put myself in any danger. I could just shut the book, I can just stop the film. Games in particular are a really good way to explore it because, you are in control of the character, you are making them go over there and open doors, like living vicariously through someone else doing the things that I can't experience firsthand. JuOn has always stood out as one of the scarier franchises for me as its setting is right in reality, no weird torture dungeons or dream worlds. Just a curse that follows you around in your everyday normality, eventually claiming your life. Nowhere is safe, and that idea has always sat with me in a really uncomfortable way. So a game based around this franchise seems exactly right up my alley, an actual simulation of what is to me one of the scariest horror movie series of all time. Released in 2009 and developed by Field Plus with the film's creator Takashi Shimizu sitting in the directorial chair, JuOn was met with negative reception upon its release. Who published this thing then? Oh, what? Those who don't know, these are the guys that went on to publish Deadly Premonition, my all-time absolute favouriteest thing ever. The word redemption is springing to mind. I want to start this off though by looking at the box art. Ours differs quite significantly from the North American version. Where the North American artwork isn't the most amazing thing in the world, it at least does the job of informing me of the content. I see the similarities to the source material as well as understanding its horror intent. I kinda even like the tagline Haunted House Simulator, as it almost hints at the setting and gameplay style likely to be encountered. In fact, our disc and Wii home screen are reminiscent and consistent with the North American release, but our box art? What universe have I stumbled into? Who even is this random woman? Ooh, must be scary if she has to hide behind the couch like a 3-year-old. Fright Simulator, aka the shittest synonym of horror game. Scare the bejesus out of friends and family. Well, if there ever was a word to kill any spooky vibes I might have built up, it would be bejesus. Like, legit, whose idea was this? Why is it so disconnected from the source material, or anything remotely scary for that matter? Hope at least one person was fired. The intro sequence to the game is this weird low production quality live action thing that takes place in the series' iconic house. Ooh, I like that face at the window, but mate, if I saw that, I'd have bolted straight out the front door. Getting into the game, we have very little setup for the different scenarios we'll be exploring. You're asked your gender and zodiac sign when starting up, but as far as I'm aware it has no bearing upon the gameplay apart from these personality assessments you get when finishing a level, and they are pretty brutal. Finish a level in the game measures your fear levels somehow. I have no idea what it's actually measuring. Maybe how much you moved your hand, like maybe if a scare makes you jump it tracks that? Honestly, no clue. But this personality assessment screen was way too funny. Dead inside. Piss off, you cheeky bitch! There's a total of 4 initial levels, each controlled by a different character in a different setting, as you're pursued by the series antagonists Kayako and Toshio. The story really is very basic, and the different characters are just here to justify having different scenarios to play through. There's not much here building on the lore of the films, or even much to explain the lore in the first place. There's some hints to it, with quotes appearing at the start of levels, kind of explaining the curse, and some of the ghosts' backstories being explored when getting all the game's collectibles, but if I wasn't already familiar with the story and characters, I would have zero clue as to what was going on here other than spook. Initially, I did find the game's atmosphere really unsettling. There's no music, no way of defending yourself, the locations are dark and ominous, and the first level even gave me Silent Hill vibes in the sense of aesthetics with its rusted industrial factory location. Settling into the game was unnerving as I got used to the kind of scares this game was going to produce, and in what capacity Kayako and Toshio would appear. But it wasn't long before the horror just boiled down to cheap jump scares. I mean, they still do add this level of anticipation, but do little to create atmosphere, which I would argue is much more important than just making a loud noise and hoping to get a fright out of someone. Traversing the levels is an absolute ball ache though. Like, the controls are just so strange. Unlike every other Wii game I've played that uses the Wii Remote and Nunchuck together to move around a free roaming environment, this just uses the Wii Remote on its own for some reason. When I saw this didn't have Nunchuck support, I was genuinely expecting some sort of on-rails experience or something. Instead of using the Nunchuck to move our character around, we just aim the Wii Remote in the direction we want to go and press the B button to move in that direction. Standing still allows you to move your torch around the screen in the direction you point the Wii Remote, but when you start to move, it locks your character into this one position, which is really unhelpful, as in this view there is really very little feedback on the screen as to where you're actually aiming. Even when standing still, the feedback at the cursor position isn't apparent, it's more of a suggestion as to where you might be pointing. It's also really unresponsive, and I found myself fighting with the camera throughout the entirety of the game. It would spin around and just not go where I wanted it to. Although it would break immersion slightly, I think this game really needed an on-screen cursor to help with the control. I was constantly pausing the game because there is a cursor to help me reorient my position. It's so unresponsive. I was questioning my setup, like, was I too close to the TV or something? But from the feedback I got from the pause screen as well as the Wii home screen, there was no issue with my setup. The game just controls like garbage. It's probably one of the worst controlling Wii games I've ever played. And it wasn't just the camera position, like I was losing a lot of time during levels trying to fidget around to try and position my character to open doors and grab collectibles. And you know your game isn't feeling well when something as simple as picking something up or turning around becomes a chore. And the speed you move when walking is painful. I can understand how a slow walking speed could build anticipation as you creep through these dark corridors, but this actually feels more frustrating than terrifying as impatience takes over. There's two reasons I can speculate as to why the movement is so slow. One, the controls are so bad that if you moved any quicker it would be even harder to control and virtually unplayable. And two, if you move quicker the game would probably take about 45 minutes to complete. Honestly, if you know what you're doing, you could knock this game out in an hour and a half. I suppose it's not all bad moving so slow. Couple it with one-handed controls and I could check my social medias when walking down particularly long uneventful corridors. This exploration style of gameplay will take up the majority of the experience as you search through rooms looking for keys or codes to open various doors, with the goal just being to get to the end of the level. Although the hospital mixes it up a little bit as you'll mostly be triggering different events in order to progress through it. While the levels themselves do add variety as they are all incredibly distinct from one another, the puzzle solving, if you will stay consistently as simple as it was for the first level, so in that sense the difficulty doesn't increase. It only gets tricky when you take into consideration your time limit. So your torch is powered by batteries, and if the batteries run out, Kayako kills you and you have to start the level over. But you can find spare batteries throughout the levels, with later levels making them a little more sparse. The final level in particular is stingy with the batteries, and I did run out of time a couple of times before reaching the end. It did create this level of tension almost as I tried to race to the end in virtual slow-mo, just thinking, why won't you run, you idiot? More because if I've made a lot of progress and I'm close to finishing a level, I don't want to have to do all that again. The prospect of monotonously trudging through dark, empty corridors at a snail's pace was the real dread, not the scares of the atmosphere. The predictability of the scares kills any replay value too, as you encounter the same scares in the same locations every time. There's nothing random, it's virtually all scripted. The games in the past that I've found the scariest have been those that have this level of unpredictability in the scares. Ones that are completely random that might not even happen to you at all. Silent Hill 4 and Fatal Frame 3 being really good examples of this. But remove anticipation and you can't use your imagination anymore. It just becomes a game of memory as you brace yourself for the jump scare you know is about to happen. Well, a second player can grab a Wii Remote and jump in at any time. They can trigger unique scares if you want a more random experience, but all you get is these shitty and mostly generic images. Christ. Speaking of scripted sequences, the game mixes it up from time to time with a quick time event. Because nothing gets my horror pulse going like maniacally waving my arms around like an imbecile. So yeah, you have to move the Wii Remote in the direction of the arrows to get through. Again, these don't differ if you have to replay the level, and they have this added frustration that if you miss an arrow, then you instantly die and have to start the level all over again. I never tried with these, I just used the patented wave your hands in the air like you just don't care technique, and that worked just fine like 90% of the time. Except for with the cats, I'd had like 3 times against these for some reason. How is this tiny black cat killing me? But these are so dumb. You'll always get one at the end of a level, and spoilers, like the movies, everyone always dies, so you know your character's gonna die when you reach the end anyway, but I legit had a moment where I got killed in a quick time event, only to find out if I got past that one set of arrows, then I had literal seconds left of the level when I would have been killed anyway. But I guess I kinda have to be honest, this quick time event-y thing where you had to keep the Wii Remote's cursor in the tiny circle was pretty tense, especially when Kayako was right in my fucking face, holy shit! I think there was only like 2 instances of this though, and even then the circle you were tracking followed the same path, so it was easy to remember where to point. So mind to kind of mention at the start there's 4 initial levels. Well, these are the factory, hospital, apartments and offices. Although very distinct from one another graphically, they are so bland. Areas are void of decoration and just everything looks a little dated. Even for the time, this is not a good looking game. I found it particularly jarring when Hare would retreat away or attack me. Wait, what? The hospital was probably the worst, with grey, uninspired corridors and dull rooms that all look the same. In each level there's a series of collectibles that, when found, come together to create a piece of information relating to the ghosts that have been pursuing you. These were generally not too bad to find apart from in the hospital, where triggering a scare would make a collectible appear but in another room entirely, so that was a little annoying. But anyone who's seen the films know that Kayako and Toshio haunt those that have a connection to the house they were killed in, like those that lived there or even just visited it. This house is iconic to the franchise, but so far isn't a playable level? Well, find all of the game's collectibles and you get the secret 5th level which takes place in the house. Oh, this is cool! The developers actually visited the house the films are set in to enable an accurate recreation. Just seeing those stairs and walking up them was just like, whoa! I'm such a fucking nerd. Story-wise, this final level ties all the characters together, as we find out Erika from the first scenario survived her encounter with Kayako in the factory and returned home. To the cursed house. And the other characters we've been playing as are all members of the same family that have just moved into the infamous abode. This ends with Erika finding the bodies of her family bagged up in the attic before Kayako drags her away to join them in their fate. Bit shit like that the cursed house, the thing that most people will be here to experience, is locked behind a completion bonus. This should just be staple. Granted, the game's not difficult to complete, but the fact that it's an optional extra just baffles me. Ugh, this was a complete waste of time and effort. I've never been more frustrated at something so mundane before. It controls like shit, there's barely any story, it looks vile, and probably the worst of all, it's not scary, which is a real shame as there's so much potential here. There's a few occasions when this game really got me. Kayako's head in the mailbox did it for me for some reason. The hospital had a couple of really subtle scares that you might even miss if you weren't paying attention. Stuff like seeing Kayako's face in an x-ray, or here when I saw a pair of feet under the curtain. No noise or anything, just someone stood there. And I was just like, oh shit, what the fuck is on the other side of that? So of course I investigate and nothing. Dude, I need more stuff like this. And when Erika's phone rang, but the sound came through the Wii Remote and on the other end of the phone was Kayako making her death rattle. Playing in my house! You bet your ass I shat myself, that was immersive as balls. But the good equates to about 5 minutes of the entire game. This could work well as like a stealth game like Alien Isolation, constantly being pursued by the indestructible villain, also while piecing together the puzzle of the curse. Shit, that sounds awesome. Imagine walking down the corridor and hearing the death rattle behind you just getting louder and louder. Or even if this had random encounters and scares, or rare encounters, or actual enemy variety, then it might have made it tolerable. But what we get instead is a bare bones experience not worth anywhere near the price of admission. I would just give this one a skip and watch the films instead. Hey kids, thanks for watching. Although this game turned out shit, I guess I'm kind of glad I played it, as it made me really think about what makes an effective scare to me. I've come out wiser at least, always learn something new, eh? Don't forget to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, links down below, and I'll see you next time guys. Goodbye.